Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show. Today we're going to be talking about is CEO pay out of balance, and who better to talk about or discuss this topic with me than David Chun, who's the founder and CEO of Equilar. David, welcome.
Thanks, TK. Always a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, you guys have morphed from all your compensation data to your governance solutions data. You have some solutions that people should certainly check out. But today, I'm going to just put you in a different mode, if that's okay.
Happy to talk about it,
Okay.
TK.
So if we look at CEO pay over the last 20 years, you'll see it multiplied in the hundreds %. If we look at non-exec employees, it's in the tens of %, okay? So on this show, we've always tried to balance what's in the best interest of the corporation and the best interest of shareholders to try and create shareholder value. So when you look at CEO pay and you look into the future and you say, can this trend continue of being out of balance on what people are concerned about? What is your take on the reality of CEO pay when we look into the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think this is something that people would love to be able to have a clear, concise answer on, and frankly, there is no easy answer to this question. But I think the reality of it is if you look at the pay of the top people across any profession, and we'll talk about CEOs as an example. But if you go beyond CEOs, you look at athletes, you look at musicians, you look at artists. There has been, frankly, a greater income disparity between the top of the house relative to the average employee. And as we all know, companies are anticipating to disclose the CEO pay ratio next year. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition, but we need to be cognizant that that's what's on tap. What CEO pay is a function of, frankly, the growth of the equity markets and looking at the value creation of companies. And as a result, CEO pay has basically mirrored that as part of their pay packages over time. And what we're seeing here with the income disparity is that there's frankly a pretty finite pool of talent that could actually run public companies. There's less public companies. You take the Russell 3000, you have 3,000 executives that have had CEO experience that have run a company. And you could say that there are plenty of other executives just outside the CEO's office that could potentially run it, but there really isn't that many CEOs that could, individuals that can run companies. And I think, you got to understand where a good example here in the news is Hunter Harrison, right, who just got, was named CEO of CSX, activist fund, Mantle Ridge brought him in. Just on the rumor of him coming on board, stock went up billions of dollars on his rumor. There was an $84 million buyout to bring him along. At the end of the day, the proxy advisors are supporting that, the company needs him. So I understand that there are people who are upset with where CEO pay has gone, but the reality is, the disparity has become that, frankly, running a public company and, what it costs to bring a CEO on board. And if you look at the competition for talent, where these CEOs could potentially go run a PE-backed company, be hired by an activist somewhere, that's just really the cost of talent.
And no one would blink at any of these other locations if they made $200 million or $300 million.
Absolutely. These PE firms are hiring these executives all the time to run companies that are outside of the public scrutiny, that aren't pay packages that aren't disclosed. Frankly, many of these pay packages are highly levered in the sense that there's a lot of value creation that needs to occur to realize that. But the reality is there are clearly many examples of pay packages that were poorly designed and pay for failure, and don't get that's just going to happen. But the reality is, in terms of what it takes to bring in somebody to run, turn around certain situations, that's the market today.
And you could argue that the shareholders have spoken, because if you look at, say, on pay, I think everybody was surprised how much support shareholders gave pay packages, okay? And there's very few that fail. And if they fail, for most of the occasions, I think we would agree that they fail for a reason.
You're right. There are very few, going back to, the passage of Dodd-Frank, we got 6 to 7 years of history here for most companies around SAM pay results, and overwhelming majority are passing. I mean, we're less than 2% and be, 1 to 2% this year. Very few companies are failing. That being said, we have been in an unprecedented bull market since the passage of Dodd-Frank. So, as Warren Buffett says, when the tide goes out, we'll see who has bathing suits. So we haven't. The reality is we haven't been tested. So, but you're right. And the good thing about SAM pay, right? A lot of the poor practices that we saw before, you don't see the single triggers. You don't see, the gross ups. So that has worked to clear out. The ultimate pay levels, I don't see them going down. And frankly, with what we're seeing with technology, with automation, with robotics, with AI, candidly, companies are going to be able to create more value with less employees. And it's going to be, this challenge of this income disparity is an issue that's not going to go away.
Yeah. And the tenure of a CEO in office is also shortening.
Yeah.
So, that probably jacks up the price even further, knowing that.
Yeah, and the reality is, when people are, have to go bring in somebody from the outside to take the CEO spot, in a turnaround type situation, there's, make-whole requirements associated with that. So, the numbers will continue to escalate.
Yeah. So while I have you, and we got about 3 minutes left, if you were the chair of a comp committee and it was time for you to bring in a compensation consultant, what questions would you ask of the compensation committee to make sure that you were picking the best one for your organization?
Sure, happy to chime in with a couple thoughts on that. I mean, as you know, the role of comp committee chair has changed significantly over the last several years, especially with the passage of SAM pay, with that adoption. So I guess a couple things. I'm a big fan of Adam Bryant's column in the New York Times, the corner office, and where he interviews CEOs and asks them different questions. And one of the questions he consistently asks is, when you interview somebody, what are your top interview questions? And so one that I've adopted, which I think is relevant for here, is I would ask a comp consultant, tell me about if you could go back and redo a pay package that you recommended, which one would that be and why? Because I think, let's face it, not all pay packages have been perfect. And I would love to be able to hear an honest answer from a comp consultant who had advised somebody to say, okay, something, in hindsight, this is something that I would have done differently. And I think that's where I would love to be able to work with somebody who had that experience and who learned from where they may have done something that wasn't, in hindsight with 2020 vision, could have been done differently. Also, now more and more, as you know, comp committee members are out engaging with investors, especially if there's going to be a tricky situation going on. And so I would love to know, what experience have you had advising boards around shareholder engagement matters? How are you preparing comp committee members? What are your recommendations on that? The last area, which we're going to see more and more focus going forward, is going to be around incentive plan data. And I would love to know your thoughts and philosophy on how to construct the right incentive plan, your philosophy in working with management to construct that plan. So that experience around incentive plan design.
Yeah, I'd probably ask about them, how they go about pushing back when they are in discussions where they know somebody's going down the wrong trail.
Sure.
Because I'm sure that they get put in that situation, and how do they step up?
Yeah. At the end of the day, as you know, with comp, there's never a right answer. There are a lot of opinions. There are no right answers. And so you're absolutely right, is when do you step up and speak up at that point.
Well, David, as usual, you always bring a vast array of knowledge, and we appreciate that. And it's a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Great. Great. Thank you, TK.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take a look at another critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. We'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelly Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.